Jonathan Hayes survived the first 3 days of the Knox event. He found a home, he found a vehicle. He even reclaimed a small corner of Riverside. But surviving was never the same as winning. Because every sunrise brought one question that haunted him more than the zombies ever could. Where was his wife? That night, Jonathan couldn't sleep. His body was exhausted, but his mind refused to rest. He pulled the curtain shut, blocking every window in the house. It wasn't much, but if the dead couldn't see him, maybe they would leave him alone for one more night. Before closing his eyes, he made himself a promise. He would reclaim Riverside, not because anyone had ordered him to, because it was still his home. And somewhere in that city, he hoped his wife was still alive. The next morning, Jonathan woke up just after 6. Breakfast was quick and forgettable. He grabbed his crowbar and stepped outside. The parking lot near Spiffos was packed with infected. There was no clever plan this time, only patience. Swing, push, swing again. One zombie after another fell to the ground. Hours passed before Jonathan finally lowered his weapon. His arms felt heavy, his shoulders burned. By midday, every muscle in his body reminded him that survival had become a full-time job. Luck finally smiled at him. Hidden among the abandoned vehicles sat a Spiffos delivery van. The body was intact. The engine still looked healthy. Jonathan opened the driver's door and couldn't help but smile. The keys were still inside. Someone had planned to come back for it. They never did. Now it had a new owner. With a working vehicle secured, Jonathan headed toward the nearby gas station. His goal was simple. Fuel meant freedom. But as soon as the station came into view, he stopped. The place was crawling with zombies. Far too many. Jonathan quietly backed away. A dead hero saved no one. Sometimes the smartest decision was simply knowing when to leave. Back at home, another thought weighed on his mind. Ben, his partner, his closest friend. Jonathan couldn't leave him lying in the street forever. He carried Ben's body to a flower bush he remembered Ben mentioning day by day. No matter how busy life gets, Ben once joked, "I'm retiring somewhere with flowers like these." Jonathan gently laid him to rest. There were no speeches, no police honors, only silence. Rest easy, partner. The afternoon was spent searching nearby houses. Food, medicine, anything useful. The apocalypse had a strange way of changing priorities. A few days ago, breaking into someone's house would have been a crime. Now, it was called surviving. After resting for a while, Jonathan returned to the gas station. This time, he intended to clear it. Every zombie that fell brought him one step closer to securing Riverside's future. It took time. More time than he expected. But eventually, the station was quiet. For the first time in days, Jonathan allowed himself to believe that progress was possible. Across the road stood the Riverside Police Department, his workplace, the place where he had spent years protecting the town. Now it belonged to the infected. Dozens of them wandered around the entrance. Jonathan watched the building in silence. He wanted to go inside and get it back. But not today. Some battles required more than courage. They required patience. That evening, Jonathan washed the dried blood from his clothes before sitting down with a simple meal. The radio still worked, barely. A weather report warned of a powerful storm approaching Knox County. Another emergency broadcast mentioned failed containment efforts, possible laboratories, and the mysterious infection spreading across the region. Before any real answers came, the signal disappeared into silence. Jonathan turned the radio off. Sometimes, not knowing was easier than listening. The rain arrived the following morning. Gray clouds swallowed the sky. Jonathan stared out the window for a while before picking up a notebook. Maybe he should start writing everything down. His thoughts, his memories, his regrets. He laughed to himself. Keeping a diary? That never sounded like something a police officer would do. Besides, he always believed diaries were for people expecting to die, or people hiding something. He closed the notebook and grabbed his keys instead. There was still work to do, and Riverside wasn't going to save itself. The rain showed no sign of stopping. Fighting in weather like this was risky, so Jonathan let the blue sedan do the hard work. One by one, the infected were knocked aside as he slowly cleared the streets surrounding the Riverside Police Department. It wasn't the way he imagined reclaiming his station, but desperate times rarely offered perfect solutions. When the entrance was finally clear, Jonathan stepped inside. The building felt frozen in time. It almost looked as if everyone had simply walked away. Almost. The only thing still moving was a lone infected prisoner trapped behind the holding cell door. Jonathan forced open the evidence room, hoping to find weapons. Nothing. The lockers were empty. The armory had already been stripped clean. His fellow officers had taken everything they could before disappearing. He quietly sat down at his old desk. For a brief moment, he could almost hear the conversations, the ringing phones, the laughter after another long shift. Those days already felt like another lifetime. Leaving the station behind, Jonathan drove through every corner of Riverside. He slowed down at every neighborhood. He honked loudly. He checked every house, every street, every parking lot. If someone was still alive, they only needed to answer once. But nobody ever did. Only the rain replied. As the storm grew stronger, Jonathan returned home. He picked up the detective novel he had read countless times before. The story was familiar, comforting. Anything was better than listening to the silence outside. Later that evening, he switched on the television and the radio once again. The broadcasts were becoming weaker. Fragments of news still broke through the static. Military operations, laboratories, the infection. Then, nothing. The voices that once connected the world were slowly disappearing. Another day ended, without answers, without hope. Before sunrise the next morning, Jonathan was already outside. He tightened his grip around the crowbar. There were still zombies in Riverside, which meant there was still work to do. Swing, push, swing again. The movements had become instinct. One infected after another collapsed onto the wet pavement. Minutes turned into hours. His breathing became heavier, his arms slower, his thoughts less focused. Fatigue was becoming just as dangerous as the infected themselves. Then, it happened. One zombie slipped through his guard. A scratch across his arm. Another lunged forward before he could recover. A sharp pain in the chest. Jonathan fought back with everything he had. When the last infected finally hit the ground, he simply stood there, staring at the blood running down. He already knew. This wasn't just another wound. Jonathan collapsed onto the rain-soaked road. Around him lay dozens of bodies. He had won another fight. But this time, victory meant nothing. For the first time since the outbreak began, He felt completely helpless. All those plans, all those promises, reclaim Riverside, find his wife, build a future. Reality had shattered them in a single careless moment. But there was still one promise he refused to break. He had to find her before he became one of them. Jonathan climbed back into the blue sedan. This time, he searched every single corner of Riverside, the shopping district, the ice cream store his wife used to love. The wealthy neighborhood. The junkyard. The factories. Not one place was left unexplored. Every empty building stole another piece of hope. By sunset, he finally accepted the truth. She was nowhere to be found. Poor Jonathan. Even at the end, Riverside had given him nothing but silence. That night, Jonathan returned home carrying a heavier burden than ever before. He looked at the notebook he had laughed at just yesterday. Without saying a word, he opened it. Maybe diaries weren't only for people waiting to die. Maybe they were for those hoping someone else would survive. He wrote down everything: his name, his story, Ben, the outbreak, and one final message. If anyone ever found these pages, they would know someone had fought until the very end. At 1 o'clock in the morning, Jonathan suddenly woke up. His breathing was uneven, his vision blurred for just a moment. He didn't need a doctor anymore. Deep down, he already knew what was coming. No, he whispered to himself, I won't die here. Jonathan refused to become another monster wandering through his own home. He grabbed his keys one last time. Outside, the storm still raged across Riverside. The blue sedan roared to life. Its horn echoed through the empty streets. One by one, the infected followed the sound. Jonathan kept driving, leading them farther away from the neighborhood, farther away from the place he once called home. If this was going to be his final patrol, he would make it count. At exactly 7 o'clock, on the fourth morning after the Knox event began, Officer Jonathan made his final sacrifice. He never reclaimed Riverside. He never found his wife. But until his very last breath, he never stopped protecting others. Officer Jonathan died in the line of duty. His shift was over. His courage never will be forgotten.